Welcome to the Tech Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Vincent, and on this podcast, I interview people in tech. As always, this show is sponsored by the Consulting Launch Method, where I help experienced tech professionals build their own consulting business without spending years figuring out the business side. We've helped clients go from first idea to first clients in 90 days and to six figures within a year. If you want to learn more, connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message. On today's show, I'm very excited to have Monisha Jain on, who's a product manager at Board International. And, there in that role, she's building Gen AI tools. She's a product manager for Gen AI tools and experiences for enterprise FP&A. So welcome, Monisha, to have you here. So let's get straight into it.
Yep.
The first question I was asked I would love to start with is looking back at your career, Monisha, what has been the decision or the project that you're most proud of, and what made it stand out for you?
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. A little bit of a background, right? Like, what exactly am I coming from? So yes, as Vincent mentioned, I'm the product manager specializing in the AI agents. I'm based in London. But my background is in statistics. So I've always been drawn to what data tells you about how people behave, right? Not just what they say they need. So that kind of led me from, say, data and operations roles into product and eventually building AI systems today, right? But the thing which I think has been one of my most learning moments, which is what I call one of my proudest moments, was the opportunity I jumped into product. So I lived in Singapore and I made the decision to move to London for a role in blockchain.com, and that was in crypto. And it was one of my first times entering the crypto world, in the fintech world. This was like almost 5 years back. And it was where I got the taste of, let's say, product, right? Understanding what I care about building, understanding if what I'm building is actually helping the users who I'm building for, and also seeing that maybe the problems which I think is a problem may not actually be the problem. There might be a root cause lying behind it. So in blockchain.com, I had the opportunity to build active trading tools for crypto for mobile apps, so iOS and Android apps. So that aspect and that experience, I think, is one of the jumps or leaps which actually spanned my career for the last 5 years. So that was the first critical moment or turning point in my career, as I would say it.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely in the recent, my proudest moment is working on the GenAI agents in Board today. Having the ability to jump into this, let's say, dark space or too vast of a variety of space for the AI, where there's so much hype in the market for the last, I would say, 2 years now, right? Something which has always excited me is that I didn't need to wait for permission. I didn't need to wait for a degree. I didn't need to have a 4-year degree in software engineering to be able to jump into this particular domain and start contributing. So I think that's my proudest moment. In the last 18 months, I've been working on learning the domain of FP&A, understanding how artificial intelligence works, artificial intelligence, machine learning, how do LLMs work? How can we make it work based on what the user wants it? So I'm a big believer in human in the loop approach, at least for the next few months. I think the agents are going to be your colleagues, not just tools, right? But the ability to earn the trust of the user using that agent, I think that's going to be the upcoming next. And that's my proudest domain I'm working in right now.
And how are you building that at Board to build that little trust between the user, the human, and the AI agent? How does that work?
Absolutely. So I think let's say, a short-term way of gaining your users' trust on using the agents is by making it explainable, is by making it reliable. What do I mean by that? When an agent is in our domain, in my platform at Board today, and the agent is interacting with the user in natural language, and I ask a specific question in my finance domain, what is the EBITDA analysis, this year versus last year? The agent answers the question based on the data of the customer and the user. The way they can trust is by understanding exactly what's going on behind the scenes. we have a way to show the user, okay, this is what the agent used. These are the dimensions. These are the selections it did. This is the assumptions and the criteria it used to produce this output. So the number one way is to ensure that you can reduce hallucinations by grounding the data in the actual context of the user. So the
Okay.
user validate it, right? Because as an expert user, humans are going to be always more intelligent than agents, right? The humans, this is where the humans come in. They validate what the agent is saying. And then based on their natural progression of interacting with the agents, that's how the trust is gained. But I think as a product manager, we can do so many things in the user experience part of things, in the UI, right? About how can we ensure the users gain that trust faster and not just eventually stop using it, right? How can we make them adopt to treating agents as their colleagues and not as a tool, right? So those are the few things we can do to ensure that trust is being built, progression.
Yeah. That sounds very interesting in the sense when you're showing the assumptions, almost like you're taking the cover off the AI agent, you're exposing it to the user, saying, well, actually, this is what I've based my output on.
Yep.
If so you can see if it makes sense or not, if the assumption makes sense. Okay, I like
Yep.
that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Especially as you know how, like any other Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, these tools also work in terms of reasoning. So when a user asks a question, you can always see the model thinking behind, right?
yes,
Do step one, step two, step three. Eventually, I'm going to consolidate all my steps and give you an output. So I think there are different ways you can unwrap the agent's thinking or reasoning, which can make the user make it believe more, right?
okay. And the people that are using your AI agents are specialists in their field.
Absolutely. Domain specialists. So the way I'm building these agents are also domain agents because it doesn't make sense to build a generic agent. If you had to use a generic agent, you might as well just use Claude or GPT or Gemini Perplexity, whichever tool works for you for that use case. But for us, since we have solutions, what I mean by that is an FP&A solution focused on FP&A users, right? Can include a CFO, can include a FP&A analyst, can
Mhm.
include a controller, anything in the office of finance domain. The agent which I'm building is the FP&A agent. So it's a specialized agent already. It
Yeah.
understands accounting principles, rules, financial processes, financial statements, and it gets even better to answer your questions, right? So it's
Okay. Yeah.
actually better when you're interacting with it.
Gotcha. Okay. So now I'd like to just take a step back a little bit from your career,
Yeah.
and if you were starting your tech career again tomorrow, I acknowledge it started with statistics, which is not as technical, I suppose, but I guess there's definitely some logical reasoning things in there clearly. Um, Knowing what you know now, with all the changes that are happening in tech, the transitions that are ongoing, and these transitions have happened over decades, right, in different technology areas. But what is the one thing that you would do differently, that you would tell your younger self, to
Right.
do differently?
Um, this is interesting. There are actually quite a few things, which I
Yeah.
think I do differently in terms of enhancing or accelerating my career. But I think there are a few things which I'm pretty proud of in terms of my transitions. But the one thing which I always find myself, I've had a career for about 8 years now, and I've gone from data to processes. Eventually, that's led me into product and understanding users. The one thing which I would push myself in doing is don't wait for permission and go learn the domain on your own, which means, like I said in the beginning, you don't need to have a degree in software engineering to know how to code. And I think I should have done that sooner to be able to understand Python or, building a JavaScript or a SQL learning or even as simple as complex Excel formulas, right?
Yeah.
All of this I learned on the job in, say, 2, 3 years of my career, right? Not something in university, not something in between. So I feel like if I had the grasp of these things earlier in my career, I would be able to accelerate my learning and the way I can contribute today a lot more. So I think that's something I would encourage anybody actually who's getting in the tech industry even if you have AI today, I know the technical knowledge is what the agents can automatically learn faster, but it's super important to have the foundations of how things work, right? So you understand exactly, you can instruct an agent if you
Yes.
yourself know how it works. So I think that's something I would accelerate, because now I know it later in my career, but I would love to do it in the earlier part of my career.
Okay. And the outcome would be that you would kind of achieve what you have achieved now at an earlier age. Is it?
At an earlier stage. Or rather, I think I would be able to have a broader view of things, right?
Mm.
When I'm building as a product manager, coming from a data perspective, it helps a lot in terms of telemetry, or, okay, how do you track things? What signals are you getting? What decisions does it unlock? But when I'm discussing building things, right, from scratch, I rely a lot on my engineers, right, who
Yeah.
have that knowledge and background. So there have been cases where if you have a great engineering team, it works fantastic, right? They're with you in the journey. But there are sometimes you don't have engineering teams who may tell you exactly what you need. They may say a feature might need a month, when actually, if you have ways to tweak around it, maybe I can deliver this capability to my users in 10 days instead of a
Yeah.
month, right? So that negotiation with the engineering team is where I felt like, hey, if only I was able to grasp this before, I would be able to accelerate a few decisions of what I made for my products.
I know what you mean. Yeah, you have a better conversation and challenge people.
Exactly, right? With knowing things, because you can't challenge somebody without you knowing it yourself, you know?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to know to the nth degree, but at least to know to a certain level that you
Basic.
can have the conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think the logic just behind, I think the logic is what makes sense. I don't need to know the syntax of how to write, Python. I just need to know, okay, what can it do based on the capabilities I have, right? And the resources I have. So yeah, that's what I mean.
that's a great answer. I love that. Um, the next question, I suppose, would be looking ahead, right? So we took a step back at the past, but looking ahead. So
Yeah.
how do you sort of see the next chapter of your career look like for yourself? Yeah, where are you aiming at? Aiming for?
Right. Um, That's a great question. I'm going to answer that in batches of, say, 2 years and maybe 5 years, and eventually I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think a lot long term, because I think it's a lot more easier to plan for something short term.
Mhm.
But I do have a goal eventually where I started my career with Entrepreneur First, and I'll tell you why this is important for the answer. Now, Entrepreneur First was the area. I was back in Singapore, and this was my first job out of university, and I worked in this company for 3 years, where I saw people who are domain experts or in deep tech professions, like having a PhD in machine learning, AI, microbiology, whichever field they're coming from.
Yeah.
These people were, with us under a roof. It was basically like an incubator and accelerator. And I saw them talking to each other to just talk about what problems they can solve with their expertise, right? And I always had this bug of starting my own company someday. So I do know that eventually I am going to start my own company. I am going to find a problem which I think would help solve the target market, right? Whichever direction I go into. I've dabbled a few ideas. I did start a company back in university, which failed successfully because I think I got a lot of my learnings from there. So long term, definitely want to start my own company in the social tech domain. Short term, where I see myself is becoming an expert in this field, agentic AI. In the next 2 to 3 years, like I said, agents would be, according to me, colleagues, not tools. The hype of AI would be eventually on, say, a decline, right? Right now, it's too good to be true. It's very unreal, the hype,
Yeah.
where the realistic use of using this technology, I think, is going to normalize in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Um, I think over time, even multi-agent orchestration, right? Where agents hand off tasks between each other, right? That is, I think, what's going to happen. The hard PM problem, I think, isn't the capability of AI. I think it's the governance, it's the permissions, it's the adoption of users using it. Making the AI invisible, not visible in your processes. So that's my next, say, 2 to 3 years, right? I see myself progressing fast in this in this domain, where product manager too, in terms of titles, I want to lead a product, right? I want to become and go into maybe a startup someday and share the learnings I have and put into a new stage product and grow from a 0 to 10 and 10 to 100 level. So that's where I see myself for the next few years.
And you said you started your business already. Or you dabbled successfully, you said, or failed successfully. Sorry, you said. So what was that in? That kind
Yeah,
of
so this was back in like university. I started this company where it was about hand carved wooden photo frames. So this was back in university. There was four of us, and the market, the demand in Singaporean universities, students, they were our target market. Eventually, we opened up to like festivals like Valentine's Day, Diwali, Christmas. There was a huge demand in wooden phone cases, laptop cases, wooden photo frames. Now we were like, okay, let's try doing something like wooden photo frames. So we had this block of wood, which had this earthen, homegrown look to it. And we had, let's say, a secret in which we imprinted a user's picture on the wood. So not as a paste for the paper, but basically imprint the ink of the photo into the wood, right? And it was a huge success. We actually did really well for like 8 months. And we eventually had to close down the business because we made the mistake of buying inventory of huge pieces and planks of wood from Singapore. So we learned our lesson at that point where it makes sense to buy it from Indonesia, Malaysia, source the wood at a cheaper place, store it, right? So I think there were a few mistakes we made there. There were also aspects of the four of us graduating. We separated ways and eventually shared the losses, right? But I think that 8 to 12 months of working from the ground up, creating your own creating your own website. We used Shopify at that point to create a website. We started selling on Instagram, Facebook, pop-up stores, marketing it, eventually friends and family discounts, WhatsApp groups. I think we did everything possible to eventually start selling these, right? Word of mouth marketing was one of our best. And it was great. But I think eventually we decided to close it down for the better of
really.
yeah. But I think that taste was what I loved. And that's why I decided to work in entrepreneur first. Seeing those people solve ideas, I thought now it's time for me to learn at this stage. How are people doing it with investment, with actual domain knowledge, right? I saw people take their ground up companies from, say, zero to pre-seed investment, to seed investment, to Series A, right? That entire stage was very enlightening for me to see. But yes, that's why eventually I for sure know that I'm going to start my own company. I'm going to solve problems eventually.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast, Monisha. The best way for people to get in touch with you is through LinkedIn, presumably.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Fantastic. I recommend people reaching out to Monisha. She's a breath of fresh air on this podcast. A reminder to everyone listening. The show is sponsored by the Consulting Launch Method, where I help experienced tech professionals build their own consulting business without spending years figuring out the business side. We've helped clients go from first idea to first clients in 90 days and 6 figures within a year. To learn more, connect with me on LinkedIn. Until the next episode, Monisha, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vincent. It was a pleasure.